The Trudeau government continues to deal with a number of issues, many related to travel. The government says when it comes to passports, all of the delays we've been seeing across the country is due to a surge in applications. Now, to discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Brian, you looked at the numbers and you say there's really no surge. Why the delays then?
That's the million-dollar question that we don't have an answer to because the government keeps saying, well, no, it's due to a surge. So here's the situation. Between 2013 and when the pandemic started, we generally had between 4.7 and 5 million passports issued per year. That works out to between 90 and 98,000 applications and passports issued every single week if you average it out. Now, of course, there's going to be some ups, some downs. The government says, well, during COVID and in the year from April 1st, 2020 until March 31st, 2021, there was only 360 odd thousand passports issued. And then the next year, there was 1.2. But since April 1st of this year, more than 540,000 applications. Now, that sounds like a lot, but Hal, I did the numbers. It works out to 54,000 per week for the 10-week period leading up to when they said this is a problem. It is at about 55% of their pre-pandemic level. So yes, it's a surge from what they've dealt with for the last 2 years, but it is well below, as I said, just over half of what they were dealing with before. Now, people have said, well, it's because of staffing shortages. The minister said not a single employee was laid off from Passport Canada. They had them doing other work. This increase has been growing gradually since 2021. There's no excuse for there to be any staffing shortages because they're all still there. They're all still employed. Well, they must be working from home. They tell me no. Passport Canada only has 11% of their workers working from home. Now, Service Canada, which also deals with passports, about 70% of their employees are working from home. So that may be part of it. But the government just keeps trying to blame everyone else for their problems. And when it comes to passports, they say it's because you waited too long. You guys came at us with a surge of applications after 2 years. No, it's well below what they're used to dealing with. This is a problem for the department, and they've got to deal with it soon rather than let this continue to fester.
Brian, you recently wrote a column calling for 5 different Trudeau cabinet ministers to be fired or shuffled. Now, you say you're not alone in pointing out problems with the Trudeau government. Is Ottawa kind of adrift right now? What's going on?
Well, they really are. Just look at what we talked about a moment ago, passports. They can't issue passports. That's a basic government service. They can't get the security screening right at airports, specifically at Pearson. They can't get the Canada Border Services agent screening right for people coming in. So you have trouble getting into the airport to leave. You have trouble coming back if you've left the country. We've got a situation where the foreign affairs minister has diplomats going off to party it up with Russian embassy staff to celebrate Russia Day while we're ostensibly at war with them. We've got an immigration system where to bring in a skilled tradesperson, 43-month delay. There are all kinds of problems surrounding this, Hal, and these are not issues that the government can blame on anybody else, and yet they are. They continue to just try and put the blame on somebody else. It's not our fault. It's external factors, or it's the public's fault. You don't get your laptop out quick enough at the screening. This is a government that doesn't seem to be with it anymore. It's not clicking. So beyond the columns that I've written for The Sun, I've seen columns in The Globe, The National Post, The Toronto Star. Tom Mulcair, former leader of the NDP, wrote a piece saying this is a whole of government incompetence. And the former head of the civil service under Brian Mulroney, who also held senior civil service positions under Pierre Trudeau, says that the way Trudeau's running things, it's breaking the civil service. So this is not a government that's running well. They're getting the fundamentals wrong, but don't worry, they're banning single-use plastics.
Brian, there's also been a lot of controversy surrounding the Liberals' Bill C-11, or some call it the attack on our online freedoms bill. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation released a report discussing the potential harms to Canadians, and a number of Conservative MPs have spoken out about the bill. Where does it stand right now?
Well, the way it stands right now, it's going to pass. There might be some tweaks at the Senate. We have to hope for that, but I've long given up hope that the Senate will do anything of any major usefulness because they generally don't. They didn't when it was a fully partisan organization. Now this independent senators group that just, they're all independent senators appointed by Justin Trudeau who just happen to vote more in line with the Trudeau Liberals than the former Liberal senators do. So they're not overly independent. They don't stand up and tell the government that they're doing things wrong. I don't think that they'll rush the bill through before they rise for the summer, the way the House of Commons did. But I have no doubt that this will pass in one form or another. And now this is the bill that you and I have been talking about for a year or so now. It used to be called Bill C-10 before the last election. This is the one that can regulate user content, meaning, yeah, your cat videos can be regulated by the CRTC. Now, will they do that? Maybe, maybe not. But for creators who make a living off of YouTube, off of Instagram, off of Facebook, lots of Canadians do that, and they have global reach. This could actually be detrimental to them. And many of the creators, online creators, spoke up. But this is being driven primarily by Quebec's arts and entertainment industry, which wants money from organizations like Netflix, like Prime Video, and they want those to be regulated. And so the CRT is going to regulate absolutely everything online. So if you like listening to Audible for audiobooks, or you've got a Spotify account for listening to music, you're going to have to suddenly be getting pinged with the government telling you, well, have you read or listened to this Canadian audiobook? Have you watched this Canadian movie? Listened to this Canadian song? They could end up going as far as the CRTC did years ago with saying 3 out of every 10 songs on radio had to be Canadian content. Remember that rule? It's still in place. They could go that far because the government's left it wide open for them. They've kind of passed this bill giving the CRTC immense power and said, don't worry, we'll fill in the details later. Trust us. I don't. You shouldn't either.
Brian, there was a report from Scotiabank on inflation and the rising cost of living. The bank says the federal government needed to cut spending, but Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland did not agree.
Yeah, Chrystia Freeland said, I think we've done that already when she was asked on Monday. She was hosting U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, basically one of her counterparts in the Biden administration. And she was asked about this report, very interesting report that said, look, the Bank of Canada has a role in fighting inflation using monetary policy, raising interest rates and the like. But if the government also has a role, and if the government doesn't play a role by reducing government spending, now well beyond the pandemic spending, they were talking about ongoing growth in spending, because even with the pandemic spending cut back, other areas of government spending continue to grow. So Scotiabank's chief economist, their director of forecasting and modeling, released this report saying government needs to do its part, and if they do, we won't need to see interest rates rise as high as we fear. Why is that important? Because the Bank of Canada said, based on their projections, they will have to continue raising interest rates. And by the time you get around to renewing that mortgage that you signed on to for 5 years, just a year or so ago, you're going to see median monthly payments go up by $600 to $1,000 a month. That's incredible pain. Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland have a choice. We're going to see new inflation numbers out Wednesday morning. I'm betting that they're going to continue to be well above norms, well above where they should be. They've got a choice to try and do their part so that it's not all put on the Bank of Canada, which then puts it onto businesses and homes and homeowners and household budgets. They've got to do their part so that that pain the Bank of Canada is going to inflict is lesser. And so far, they're saying no.
You know, my mortgage is coming up for renewal next year, next July, and I locked it in a number of years ago for 2.79. And at that time, I thought, maybe that's not a great deal. Wow, look at it now.
Yeah, you might want to renegotiate now if you can, and talk to your bank, talk to your mortgage broker. That's what I would tell anybody watching right now that's in that situation.
Absolutely. Brian, you and I have chatted before about how the Trudeau government is not ready to give up COVID-19 as a political tool. This week, they suspended some of the travel restrictions, but Brian, they hinted that they could come back in the fall with a new definition of who exactly is fully vaccinated. Meaning what?
Well, they might go to 3 doses as fully vaccinated. Now, I've spoken directly to public health officials, including Ontario's chief public health officer, who you might think would be all in favor of saying, oh, yes, you've got to have 3 doses. Well, Dr. Kieran Moore, our chief public health officer, he encourages 3 doses, but he's against making it mandatory or changing the definition. And he has many good reasons, including, have you been infected lately? How long since you were infected? Have you had, some people will need 4 doses. Some people are going to be fine with 2. There are a lot of variable factors in this, even for people that believe you should be getting a 3rd dose, or at least most people should. But the Trudeau government doesn't follow the medical science. They follow the political science. They won the election last year on vaccine mandate questions. That was a big part of why they won, scaring suburban voters in the Lower Mainland and the Greater Toronto area that this had to be done. And polling showed it was popular with certain groups. They got votes from those groups. They stayed in power. Now they don't want to give it up. And so they're talking about bringing these vaccine mandates for travel and for work back in the fall. They just dropped them yesterday on Monday. Now they're saying they might come back in the fall. It's going to depend. I don't think that this is something that will sit well with the wider public the way it did perhaps last fall. But we'll have to wait and see. It's again, though, it's following political science, not medical science.
Brian, Parliament is set for another year of virtual settings. Now, is this part of the same issue we were just talking about of not wanting to lose COVID-19 as a political tool?
I think so. Look, the legislatures elsewhere are meeting in person. I'm sitting right now not far from Queen's Park, Ontario's legislature. They're about to have a new cabinet sworn in on Friday morning. They're going to have, I believe, a brief sitting this summer. They're going to be meeting in public. There's no masking requirements. Everyone can be there at once. Now, some MPPs may choose not to be there, but they can be. Those same restrictions apply to Parliament Hill, which, by the way, is in Ontario. But Justin Trudeau, remember, he is a guy who masks when he's in the House of Commons, but not when he's in meetings with top Democrats in California. He masks when he's in public settings in Canada, but then parties it up in Europe with foreign leaders at conferences. This is about the same issue, following the political science, scaring his base of voter support that COVID is still a real threat, but then ignoring those same warnings when he's traveling. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Many MPs have spoken out against it, saying that this is not the way Parliament should work and that we lose out on a lot of the social interaction where MPs can walk across the aisle, talk to somebody from another party about an issue that might be affecting their constituents, but also affects the other MP from a different party. And they can work on issues together, approach the government, approach bureaucrats, get things fixed in a very informal way. And that can't happen when you're having these virtual sittings.
Brian, the CPC leadership race continues. Now, you're saying that the Conservatives may be battling somebody other than Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland, the Conservative leader, whoever they choose. Who do you have your eye on right now?
Yeah, well, lots of speculation that Justin Trudeau will leave. Now, I happen to think that if Pierre Poilievre wins the Conservative leadership race, that Justin Trudeau sticks around, but that's not for sure. Neither is Poilievre winning the leadership. These are factors, the unknowns that we don't know at this point. But there's increasing chatter that Chrystia Freeland may not be interested, may not seek out the top job if and when Justin Trudeau leaves. And by the way, he appears checked out already. His government's adrift, and he doesn't seem to care. Nothing's working, and he's not trying to fix anything. So maybe he is leaving. One name that keeps coming up, and I've been watching this guy for some time, is François-Philippe Champagne. He's currently the industry minister. He's a Quebec MP who's fluently bilingual, slight accent in English, but speaks beautiful English. He's got international business credentials. He's worked in the States, in Europe, in the UK for quite a while, and he's a blue liberal. This is why it's important for the next leader to be flexible in who they're going, next leader of the Conservatives to be flexible in who they're going after. François-Philippe Champagne, being a blue business liberal, would be a much different person to take on than Justin Trudeau. He's not woke. He's not trying to look at those same issues. It would be a very different battle.
Do you think Champagne would potentially look at canceling Bill C-69, which would really help our energy sector?
I haven't talked to him about that specifically. It would be tough for me to say. He is still a Quebec liberal at the end of the day. He is still a Quebec MP, but he'd be much more open to that than Justin Trudeau, especially if a case can be made as is currently being made, that look, because we don't have Canadian oil, you've got Russia being able to fill its coffers to continue the war in Ukraine. You've got Joe Biden going cap in hand to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to try and get more oil. There's an incredible business case to be made for that, and an environmental case and an ethical case. Champagne would be more open to that, but I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but he wouldn't be motivated by the same things that motivate Justin Trudeau in the morning, which isn't about making government work right, isn't about the Canadian economy. It's about virtue signaling that he's doing the right thing or appears to be doing the right thing to his base of supporters rather than actually looking after what matters to Canadians.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.